So welcome to Intro to DevTools with Chrome. I am Brian DeVito. I am a software engineer here at Labs. I get to work on all kinds of fun projects. So quick kind of show of hands, as I recognize some of you and some others. So who knows what, oh, and a quick note also, I'm on a Mac. So if I say Command or Option for keys, interchange that with Control and Alt if you're on Windows. So Command and Control and Alt and Option are usually the equivalents. Sometimes somebody will stray from that, but most of the time that's the equivalent. So quick show of hands, who knows what Command Option I does in Chrome? All right, I see a couple hands. Who does know what right-click inspect element? Who does that? All right. A lot more hands, okay. So, all right, we do have fairly intro people, so I'm definitely gearing for that. If you guys have a good understanding, I'm gonna try to keep it interactive. If you have questions, please just ask. And I'll just start just going through some of the tools and what they do. And I have a little outline here, and if we have time, I might be able to get into some more of the advanced things. If not, maybe we can do a follow-up and go into some deeper dives on a lot of the other stuff. So to start, I am going to use our labs page on ozk.com. So if those of you who brought computers who want to follow along, so to open DevTools, you can either inspect, like inspect element, and that will show you the element itself. And then Command Option I is the shortcut to just open it. A couple of the other shortcuts are Command Option J. So if it's closed, Command Option J will take you to the JavaScript console. So that's a good way to remember that, is J is for JavaScript, will take you to that console. Another one, now this isn't necessarily DevTools related, but it's a shortcut I found I use quite often. Command L will take you back to the toolbar, so you can go do whatever else you want to do. So we'll start with the elements panels. Those of you following along, any questions so far? Oh yes, how small is that? Super, super tiny.
Can you just show how you can move your drag from the right side? I don't know if people open it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're getting there. So this is first to, is that good? I'm trying to find like a good mix between me being able to see stuff and you guys being able to see stuff. Is that a little better? I might be able to go one more. So I'm losing a couple others here. All right, so this is DevTools. We got a couple things on top here. We're gonna cover these tabs that tell you all the stuff about what's going on behind the scenes in the browser. So first things first, if you click on the three dots here on the right side, that will open up a menu so that you can move the DevTools panel around. So you can move it to the right side, bottom, middle, or if you'd like to just detach it entirely. This is really helpful if you have like a dual monitor setup and you're troubleshooting or looking at different things. You can just put DevTools on one monitor and look at the DOM and your rendered browser on the other. So I like the bottom, and I like to use dark mode. So to get to dark mode, you can go into settings from the three little dots. And then we have theme. So you can do system preference. So if your system has like light or dark settings, you can choose that and it will, change accordingly. Man, that is bright. So I like dark mode on most things. And so let me give you guys a couple more keyboard shortcuts, because it's a lot easier to deal with DevTools on the keyboard than to keep clicking around with the mouse. And so also a big thank you to my friends and coworkers who I asked for about the past week for all their favorite tips and tricks of what they wish they knew somebody told them before they had to figure it out for themselves. So we're going to cover a couple of those as well. So while you're in DevTools, one of the shortcuts is holding down Command, and you can use left bracket or right bracket to go through the different tabs. So you can work your way back and forth through each tab. Another shortcut is the escape key. So that will, depending on which panel you're on, I mean, it does not work on console, but it will add the console to the bottom of the tab that you're on, so you can see any errors or any logging that you added to see what is happening. I'll leave that off for now because it takes up way too much room zoomed in. All right. And then one of the last ones is Command-Shift-R. So that is a Chrome shortcut for, I think it's under Edit. That is the hard reload. So Command-R will reload. If it's cached, it'll just serve you the cache. Adding Shift will do a server request for everything again. So that way you make sure you're getting your latest, whatever you've committed, changes, if you're making modifications to the DOM, anything like that. Another trick for when you're developing, if you can use private windows or incognito mode, and those will also clear all your settings and cache that you have. So it's like starting a fresh browser. And if you do not have access to that, or if you're on someone else's machine, you can also access that through guest mode, which is open guest window. You click on the sign in icon on Chrome browser, and then that will also open one, and it tells you, hey, we won't leave anything else on this computer for what you're doing. When you close this window, it's gone. So it's kind of like an incognito window, but not. So it'll remember stuff you do while you're doing it until you close it.
There was one more thing I learned recently. So if you have the inspect developer tools window open, if you press the refresh and hold it pressed, it'll populate the options for hard reload and
Okay, yeah. So this gives you the shortcuts.
Yeah.
So the comment was learning recently that if you hold down or long press on the refresh button, it'll kind of give you these shortcuts, and then you can also pick from the GUI. So like empty cache and hard reload. And this is the shortcut I was talking about earlier, the Shift Command R. All right. So how familiar is everybody with like the basic layout of how websites work? All right, a bit 50-50. So at a high level, your browser is asking the web address you go to for the files from that server. So when you put in the address of ozk.com/labs, a request goes out to some domain name servers so that they can find who has that, and then they will pass the information back along to the files that you need, the HTML, the CSS, JavaScript, and any of the other resources you might need. So like images, if you have a CDN, do you guys know what a CDN is? A content delivery network. So that's to speed up your browsing. A lot of times resources will be stored on a different place, so like closer to your physical location so that they can get there faster. So a lot of stuff in the Elements tab itself. So one of the things you can do from just about any tab is search. So if you do Command F, a search bar pops up down here at the bottom, and you can search for anything. So like Gatsby, we built this site in Gatsby. We can talk about that at another meetup. But it keeps things pretty quick. And so anything you want to search, just the same. I think you can also do, oh no, you can't do regex here. So some of the other things that you can do, if you notice like some stuff flashing as I'm hovering with the mouse over these elements, you can, oh yeah, by the way, Look up left. Little Easter egg for you guys. So you can see so this is highlighting. So what's happening when you're hovering over this is Chrome is showing you the element that you're hovering over, like visually. And then in the left corner, it's really tiny. I don't know if you can see, like in this area, right above here, it shows the name of the element. So it says div, and then it shows you either the class or the ID of that element. So this one has an ID of 3_ Gatsby. And you can see that right here in the element itself. So the element here, and then what pops up in this corner is just another way to help identify things when you're looking at more of a complex layout. So as we expand and get kind of into more and more of what's there, we'll see it kind of grows. And then we learn more and more about what's on the page also. Let me make this a little smaller so we can kind of see. So this right here is showing us the box model. So the box model is how the browser interprets the layout. So this is where you define the margin, the padding, and any like height or width restrictions. So you can see the orange is the, I believe the orange is the margin. Yeah, orange is margin, and then padding is the like yellow. And we'll get to this side panel here in a second. So we also have breadcrumbs at the bottom. So this will show you kind of where you are in the structure of the web page. So you're in the HTML, then the body, then the Gatsby ID div, and then a main div. And then you kind of can just, it's like breadcrumbs, you just keep following it down until you get to this ID that's here. And that's kind of helpful if you're kind of lost while you're looking at everything. And if you just need to go up one level, right? Because when we expand a bunch of this stuff, we might lose track of where we are. And so we can kind of just go click on it and go up one level back to, oh, this is the parent. So I can, if I want to modify the entire container of the layout, I can just go immediately up one level to see what that one does. So let's get into some of the fun styling. So on the right side of the Elements panel is all your CSS styling. So CSS is cascading style sheets, and you can turn them on and off with DevTools. So if you were trying to style something that's a little different, or if you're kind of testing a color or an overlay or gradient or something, it's helpful to use this so you can see how things might change if you don't have that rule or if you add that rule in while you're developing. So as you can see, like minimum height, it will go away and it will jump up to the top because it's not centered, because it's based on a height. As far as in those designs, padding, color. So some of the other fun things that you can do in the Elements console is edit. So you can double click and edit, or you can right click and edit. So you can edit an attribute or as the entire HTML itself. So if you wanted to add like another something in here, you could say just say hi, and I started writing twice, and then you can just click outside of that, and then it'll add that element into the DOM. So you can kind of, if you want to test some new content, or if somebody's like, hey, what would this look like, you can actually kind of do like a live editing thing and work with people on what things they do or do not want. And again, that is also accessible just like everything else. You can see it's right here. It's got its breadcrumbs. When we hover over it, we see the default styling of having a margin at the bottom. Same thing for the actual CSS properties over here. So I'm not going to get real deep into all the different kinds of CSS properties, but you can define them on the element itself. You can just click into the element box and it'll open a tab for you, or it'll open a line for you where you can type color, and you can say
lavender.
Sure, lavender, and that makes it really hard to read. because it's practically white. So you can put in named colors, or you can put in hex colors, you can put in RGB. It's really up to you. So the hex colors would be with the hashtag, that's hex, and then named colors, and RGB is red, green, blue, and if you want a transparency, you can add the alpha channel. And so you could do something like 255. I don't know. I really don't know what this color is going to be, and we'll find out. As I say, I was thinking it would be more pink because I was adding a lot more red, but you can see it's got its transparency as well. It's a little harder to see, and if you don't like that, you can just uncheck it, and it goes right back to the default state. Any questions so far? Anything you guys want me to go a little deeper on as far as things we've gone over so far? I want this to be more formal, like a conversation too. So if you guys have any questions, or like, hey, what's that? What about this? Just speak up.
I see a color on the screen that I really like.
You can tell me, and I'll give you the color code.
What fits in that picture?
Then I will use my digital color meter, and I will pick it for you.
They built that into Chrome now.
Yeah.
If you
Oh, did they really?
Pink box next to RGBA, you can use an eyedropper there.
Oh, they let you eyedrop now? Ooh,
Yeah,
spiffy.
that's
Oh, yeah.
relatively new.
Nice. Yeah, this does look new because I do not remember this. Nice. Okay. So there's now an eyedropper. If you click on the shade of the color. Let's see. So we can go into a couple of these others. So computed property. So the computed property gives you the box model and all of the CSS styles that are applied, all the CSS attributes that are applied to that element. So you'll notice it will change as I select different elements. It gives you, in the very inside of the box model, it gives you the height and width in pixels of that element. And then as you hover, it will show you visually where that padding or size is applied. So that's really helpful to see layout. Another neat trick, this is still one of my favorites even to this day, you can add a rule for whatever you want by hitting this little plus icon here. So you can say, I want to make everything have a border so I can see what's happening with the layout. If there's something that's kind of off or shifting, or you're like, what's going on here? So you can say one pick solid cyan. And so now, let me close this so you guys can see a little bit more. You can see all the elements have a border if they don't have one already. And if you really, really want to, you can go into that rule and put important, and that will make everything have a cyan border of whatever you defined. So I still use this pretty regularly. It's a nice little trick to get your layout spacing how you want to. And also with mobile layouts and responsive layouts. So here's another really useful shortcut is Command-Shift-M, which will pull up the mobile devices view, which is also helpful to move your stuff to the side. So you can see your cursor turns into a little touch circle, and that will give you any kind of, it has some pre-selected devices, or you can make any size that you want. So this is the typical iPhone X layout, or 10 if you prefer. iPad, and then at the top here you can define how much of it takes up your space. So if you want full size, you can say, no, I want this a 1-to-1 ratio. Or if you're really zoomed in on a tiny monitor, you can make it a little smaller so you can see the whole screen of the tablet or the screen that you're looking at. And then this icon here is to rotate it. So you can kind of see how it behaves back and forth.
Do you go into every one of those? Make sure to get on every one of them?
I personally do not go into every single one of them. What I like to do is kind of just hit a couple of the more popular ones. So I'll hit I'll use like the Galaxy or the Pixel. I'll do the iPhone, and then I'll do the 6, 7, 8. And a lot of these have similar aspect ratios, like the 5 and the 678 have a similar aspect ratio, and the pixels and the XLs usually have similar aspect ratio between the two. So it'll be a different size, but your stuff would stay in the same place essentially.
There's a way, I can't remember how I did it, but there's also a way to add the actual phone frame.
It's probably in the options here. Let's see. You can do screenshots. Maybe not.
There's preferences and there's like tons of.
Oh, yeah. So the menu.
Oh, you mean in this one?
No.
When you go into.
The one that says show device frame.
Oh yeah, show device frame. Yeah, so that would actually give you the actual.
Sometimes I've done that for like screenshots.
Yeah, to use for device photos for like uploading to the store, things like that. Let me hide it. I don't think you're really gonna see it.
Some of the like iPhone 6 I think would have it, where it applies to some of the.
So some devices have the frame and some do not. I bet. Maybe not. Let's see. I haven't found one yet. There we go. Okay, six has the frame. So it's a sometimes works feature, I guess. Usually, if you really need screenshots, it's easy enough to kind of find a frame in like another drawing tool and pull in the screenshots. But this will also help you take screenshots at the right aspect ratio, so you can give them to your designer people, or if you also know how to use those tools, you can add those screenshots into the frame, but you'll have them at the right aspect ratio. And let me know if I'm going too fast. I'm trying to keep it slower. Let me go ahead and get rid of the frame because we're tight for space as it is. And again, that shortcut is Command-Shift-M to toggle device mode, and it is this icon up here. Same thing. All right, let's see. Styles. Oh, you can also filter. So this kind of works like search, but if you're looking for just, if you know what class or what styling you're looking for, and you don't know, or it's harder to find itself, you can filter the CSS styles. And another trick is you can enable what they look like when they have the pseudo CSS classes. So hover, active, focus. If you want to know what something looks like when you hover over it, you're like, man, I want to change that color to lavender when I hover over it. You can select that one and you can say, okay, on hover, there's hover right here. Now it shows up, where before you don't see it because it's not active. So this is how you show those pseudo classes or those different classes when you're hovering or tabbing through something. This is how you can identify and modify those properties. So like if we wanted to change that, we could say, yeah, on the side, and you can do edit attributes, or yeah, for state, yeah. Visited hover. Another thing to know is any of the modifications that you make here, as soon as you refresh, as far as styling goes, they will disappear. So they are only active while you're editing or modifying stuff in DevTools. So helpful and also not helpful. So if you find yourself doing a lot of modifications, maybe try to save that off or copy what you did out of it first, because as soon as you hit refresh, or your browser decides to refresh for you, like if you disconnect and reconnect, it will be gone. But it is helpful with just working with somebody and doing like a live demo and changing things on the fly. Any questions so far on the Elements panel?
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned the important tag earlier for certain attributes that you want to ignore the cascading effect.
Yes.
Have you ever had an instance where that didn't work?
Yes. So the question is there any time where adding the important on a CSS property in in the class does not work, and it is if there is an important inside the element style itself. So if you defined a style, and this is kind of like the one you can't beat. So if there is a style attribute inside of an element and it has an important on it, any class that you assign to it will be overridden by whatever that important property is. That's one you cannot change with CSS. It's not really, I don't know if it's good or bad to do that, but it will not change if you try to make modifications here. So if you see something that's not changing while you're trying to do like a live demo, you might have to go in and actually edit the attribute itself, and just say, and change the style and say style equals color red, or you could just edit it itself, and you should not be able to change that. So it will always be red. And you can, and that shows up here too. So you'll see element.style, and it kind of gives it away for you. Something else too that's important that I think a lot of people kind of overlook on the intro side when they start out is accessibility. So because we're so zoomed in here, it became part of this dropdown. So to see how this link will be announced by screen readers, you can see any area attributes that are defined. This one does not, it's just a default link, but you can see that it still has its contents as login, and the text will say login, so it will announce when you tab through on a screen reader, it will say link login kind of thing. I don't know if you guys are really familiar with the area properties or the WIA and not an ally, A11Y. They're kind of the bigger nonprofit organizations that try to help define standards for accessibility so that screen readers will work for everybody else too that needs it. I'm trying to see if there's, so here's a helpful search one. So I don't know where I have ARIA things defined. So here's one that's saying this, let's see, there's also so right clicking, there's also some other stuff like scroll into view. So if you're searching, you don't know where it is, you can right click, scroll into view, and it's hidden, so it's not going to show up. So that's probably a silly one to use, or it's just not scrolling for me right now. Oh, this whole thing is hidden. Hang on, let me find one that's not hidden. Let's see, word. Okay, here we go. Listed. Trying to think of a good. Here we go. Site search. That's at the top here. If you can see that little guy right there. So you can see on this one, it has the label, it defines it, it shows you computed properties. Again, so for accessibility, there's also computed properties, so it will give you the title and the names. So if you don't see something here, the name of the thing that you're trying to do, chances are the screen reader will not see it either. So for accessible sites, or to make your site or your page accessible, it just won't announce it to the screen reader, so people probably will not find it if they're really reliant on screen readers alone. So there's some testing that we can get into as we go through the tabs. I'll show you in the audit section that's kind of applicable. And then barring any other questions, I think we've covered the bulk of the elements panel, at least as like a first pass. So any questions? I know there's kind of a lot of information there to take in, especially if you're just new. So especially if you're really new or just learning to code, please feel free to ask questions. Happy to help. And there's a lot of other experienced people here at all different levels also. So we'll move on to console. So as you can see, some things are not working. In the bright red is usually an error. Yellow is a warning, and everything else is like the equivalent of console log. You could use console log or console info, and it's basically just to send data to this console panel. So the reason it's not working is because I have an ad blocker turned on. So if I turn that off and refresh the page, those should go, well, here, let me clear console so you can see they actually did go away. So they go away. So if any of you guys are interested in InfoSec or information security, this is like the #1 place to start. Open up console, look for errors on a web page. A lot of times the errors will tell you more about the app than they should. And a lot of times in the build processes for apps, they try to strip all the console logging out. Like there's a lot of configuration you can do to remove that, so you don't actually accidentally give away something in your app that somebody might be able to exploit. So in the console panel, again, there's search, there's filtering. You can search for strings, so we can see cookie, and you can define which level. So if you don't want to see a bunch of stuff, or let's say you're using a third-party library that is constantly updating and telling you that it's updating stuff, or a browser extension, you can just turn those levels off if you're working on something else. Let's see, and if you guys are not familiar, you can basically run any JavaScript function or call or definition you would like. Depending on how familiar you are, the entire document of the web page is available. So if you wanted to get a property of document, and there's a lot of autocomplete, you can, let's see, for instance, get all the things that are defined in the location. So the current location, and Chrome will hide this by default and just kind of truncate it for you. You can expand it, and you can see, well, the origin, we went directly to it, so it comes from ozk.com, and then the actual reference is /labs, and then these are all the properties that are broken up. So you can get the path name, you can get any ports or protocols, and the way that you access all these is through dot notation, just like in JavaScript, like you would normally do. So you could say, if you just wanted to look up that one property, you could do location dot was it path name, and that will tell you you are in the labs directory. So some other tips here: tab is usually autocomplete. So if you start typing something and you tab, it will finish that, what it does in the shadow. If you're not sure what to do next, it gives you the whole long list of all the properties available on the document. And there are a lot of properties available in the document model. I'm gonna save that for your learnings on another day. The goal of this is to kind of give you guys enough reference to the tools to help you explore what web pages do, if that makes sense. So if I'm falling short of that, please tell me where I'm missing pieces, but the goal is to kind of give you enough where you can learn and keep learning about what's going on in the browser. So this is basically the console. You can see any messaging from your app, autocomplete, and same thing. If you wanted to define a function and say let I don't know, we'll say here equals location dot, is it origin? So you can define a variable, and now if I wanted to just use here, I could say here, and it shows me what I want. So like I said, anything you can do in JavaScript, you can do in the console, and then anything you define here will also be gone on a reload. So if I refresh, and I do here, it's undefined, it's gone. Doesn't know. So again, similar to elements, any modifications or things that you're doing, you don't have to worry about breaking anything. You can hit refresh and it'll go away. Yeah.
Can you actually import stuff into this too?
I have not tried to import stuff. Maybe in sources you can, because you can probably just add another source, but you would still need to make the request to go get it, right? So even though you added it, it wouldn't necessarily send a get. Yeah. So some of the other things I've been hitting here is a console sidebar. So some of these on top, this tells you, how many messages you have, any errors or warnings, and it'll jump to them or show you where they are, so you can go and see how good or bad the logging is in the console for that particular page. This no is clear, so if you get a lot of errors starting up, and you're really not focused on that and you're looking at something else, you can always just clear, and that shortcut is Command K or Control L. And again, we can use the brackets to go back and forth between the tabs. So the next one is sources, and you can do a lot in sources. So this will tell you where all the elements and third-party libraries and everything that is needed to run the page is located. So one of the most friendly and helpful things on this is this little button down here called Pretty Print. So if you're looking at some vendor's source code or profile, or you're trying to figure out what's going on, a lot of times it will be minified and end up looking like this. Now it'll still be minified, but when you hit Pretty Print, it will format it for you, so it looks more like code, and you can find your way around a little bit better. You may not know what D, C, E, and F are, but it's a lot more friendly to navigate your way around. Let's see. It is probably one of the better places to debug things that are going wrong, especially if you're relying on third-party scripts for your app or your page. So you can, let's see, what's a good one to use? I will use the forms too, because I know what that is. Oop, stop it.
How long has that Pretty Print button been there?
It's been there for quite a while. As far back as I can remember. It is definitely worth it. So that was one of the top ones I heard from friends and colleagues that said, man, I wish somebody would have told me what that little button was before I finally figured it out for myself. Yeah. So one of the things that you can do in sources is, after you Pretty Print, you can add debugging breakpoints. So you can add a breakpoint by this little green flag that shows up, and then you'll see also over here it will show you that you added a breakpoint. So what does that do? Well, in debugging, it will stop content from loading past that point. It will stop executing your app when it hits that breakpoint. So the app will essentially break. And so if we reload, one of the nice things about the sources panel is that it's one of the only things that actually will persist if you reload. So if you set breakpoints and you reload, that will still be there. So it'll save your breakpoint on that line, and then it'll say it's paused. So you can see we're not finishing loading yet. So if we continue and resume past our breakpoints, it'll finish loading the page. So I'm not exactly sure what that does just yet, because it's not really in human readable friendly format. But it gives you a place where you can start debugging, and you can start setting breakpoints and figuring out what's happening. So one of the other things you can do with breakpoints, let me get rid of these, and I'm just going to set a global one. So on the right side, this kind of tells you what's happening. So this is telling you it's on the main thread that's running, what's watching, a call stack scope, and then the breakpoints you have defined. So you can, if you click on them, it will take you right to them, and we can remove them entirely. And then down here are some really good ones. So global listeners and event listener breakpoints are really helpful to use. So you can do a lot of general global things that happen. So when the DOM loads, if you want to say, let's see, I think it was under control. So like here's some regular form controls, right? Because everything is a CRUD app. So most of the time you want to grab something when it changes, when you select or change or submit. So you can say every time on blur, stop. Like I want to know what's happening when I click or tab out of something. So if I tab out of here, it stops and it says, and it tells me where I stopped. And sometimes in really large minified files, it will take a little while to get to. And then you can pretty print, and it will take you to, this is, I don't know what CNET is, but somewhere it is listening to the blur event, and this is the first line that executes on blur. So this is helpful, like if you're having trouble with form submissions or any type of really like getting events, really any kind of events in the browser that you're trying to watch or track or see what's happening. So it could be marketing scripts, it could be like security scripts, it could be all kinds of stuff that's going on in the background there, and this will tell you what's happening. Question? Oh, okay. You've got animations, and there's a lot here. So not going to go into this, but for the intro, I wanted to show you guys this is really helpful, and it can help you explore a lot of what's happening behind the scenes in the browser. And again, this play button will resume your app, and then this is the step button. So if you wanted to see what's happening, you can keep stepping through, and it will keep taking you to the next line that's executed. So it will just, and you can just keep going. So it evaluates the if, and then it'll just keep executing as you step through one line at a time. So you can kind of follow what the logic is doing. And then when you've had enough, just hit resume, and it's back to normal. One of the other things that a lot of developer friends and colleagues wanted me to share was about script black boxing. That is probably a topic for another day. But to touch on it, you can basically in these like third-party scripts, you can open up and you can say, where is black box? Is it up here? No, did I lose it?
Might be in the settings and the triple dot.
Yeah, I was gonna say I lost
Set it,
shortcut.
or more tools.
I thought I could. No, I'm not seeing it. I thought it was on right click. Like I just did this like an hour ago.
What about that triple dot right by the? That's what you're looking for.
No, let's see. Open file. Oh, right. Yeah. So, like I said, we'll. Oh, no, content scripts. Oh, cool. Let's see if I can find one. Man, I thought for sure it was in here. All right, we can circle back on that, but it's called black boxing. So what black boxing a script does, and my apologies for just not being able to pull it up quickly while I'm presenting live demos and everything. What that does is it will, when you run your debugger and you have breakpoints set or you're trying to figure things out, it will ignore any script you black box. So what does that mean? How is that helpful? So let's say it's a vendor script and it's like Google Analytics. You really don't care what Google Analytics is doing, right? So you can black box Google Analytics, and as you debug and run breakpoints and step through things, it will just skip anything that goes through Google Analytics. So that way you don't end up diving down like a really long rabbit hole of, oh, well, I got to get through these 10 things Google Analytics does, and then I can find my problem. So that's what black boxing does.
Oh, I found it.
Oh yeah, where's it?
So you were really close. It's the three dots to the right of here's describing it. To the big X and up yep.
There.
And then settings.
And in settings. Did I accidentally hide it?
And then there's
oh yeah, here we go. Black boxing. So you can black box content scripts, or you can add a pattern. If there's a script or a specific file name, you definitely want to add. So you could add like libraries too. Like you could add like React or Vue or Angular, and any of those patterns that they match. So that way you're not going into the library, because sure, libraries might have bugs, but most of the time it's probably something you did. Then we're all just trying to figure it out.
One of the I found helpful is vendor.js for Vue apps and stuff, because I'm pretty sure it puts it aggregates all your vendors into one file. So.
Oh, okay. So one of the tips was using vendor.js, which will aggregate all of your vendor scripts and libraries.
They're already aggregated.
Oh, they're aggregated already?
I think Vue does it.
Okay.
And you don't really want to hit those breakpoints in there. So.
Okay.
If you do.
And that'll help you avoid stopping in an app that you don't need to stop in. And it's weird. I'm not used to looking at it this big either. Like usually I have a lot more visibility into everything on here. Let's see, what else do we have for sources? Pretty print.
One thing I'd like to add that I absolutely love is the debugger command. If you literally.
Oh, I was just gonna get to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple other tips and tricks and shortcuts. If you add the word debugger to your script, and you open up DevTools and run your page or load your page, it will stop at that line. So if you're trying, if you know where you need to check your code, it will stop at that line for you. It can get a little overwhelming if you kind of use it everywhere. But using, like, Chrome is smart enough to know that if you use that word, it will stop there. Another thing that you can do that was brought up, another shortcut, is Command O, which is open. So if you know the name of the script file that you want to open, here's like the search box where it will bring in all the scripts that contain that name or that path. Another thing that's really helpful is, let's say you want to pause. Let me actually just set a breakpoint on load here and just say load window. I think there's done. Let's see. Okay, so on load, we're going to set a breakpoint. And then what we can do is, so here's like the first line that's run. We're going to pretty print that, and we're going to sneak in a breakpoint above it. And we're going to say when we get to this function, we're going to stop. So we're going to reload again, and now we're going to hit the breakpoint above it. And that took us to a whole nother line. So it's evaluating, let's see if that's true. So since that will execute, we'll go back here, and we can say, we can actually edit this as it's paused in the debugger. And say, let's see, so instead of return, we can also add a console log. Actually, let's do warning so we can see it. And so then we hit save. So if you can see the little s that's right up here, or the little asterisk that's right up here, means you've made a modification, and you can save it. And you can resume, and then if we go to our console here, after we play, oh, is this too big and it's broken? Okay, there we go, it's still evaluating. Let me take that breakpoint off. and we'll play. And we should see Hello World somewhere in here. Maybe not. Oh, there. So because I modified it, we actually broke a jQuery thing that was running, which this will happen a lot. when you try to make modifications and you're not sure where you are, you will see an error. So, but it is really cool that you can actually live edit code and save it. So like we could maybe intercept this first one. But again, when you make the modifications, when you're doing this live coding, your breakpoint will be remembered, but all the code that you wrote will be gone on the refresh. So again, it's helpful to kind of help debug, or if you're trying to get at an object or something, you're not sure what it is, you can set the breakpoint, inspect, and kind of take a look at what the data is that you're getting or manipulating. So it's kind of helpful. I would not recommend trying to write like a whole function of something that you want to do in there. I would save that for your IDE. But it is helpful for trying to get diagnose vendor scripts or conflicts or issues. I actually spent some time in that recently where we had a vendor script that was, according to the vendor, not working. And so I spent some time in the debugger because they had some minified code like this. So it definitely helped to be able to write some commands in to where I knew what was happening, so I could figure out what the rest was happening, so I could fix whatever the issue was. And it took a while, but you can do it. It's just very, very slow, methodical kind of process to debug things like that. Let's see, we got that, black box, stepping in pause, debugger. Any other questions or tips that you guys want to share? Chris?
If you have a lot of breakpoints and you don't want to uncheck all of them, you can use right next to the step over.
Oh, yeah.
Or sorry, 2 more over.
This one.
No.
You can do it here too.
Oh,
This,
you can do it there too.
yeah, you can uncheck and it will unset that breakpoint. It'll keep running, but it will still remember that you had a breakpoint here.
But under the 3 dots.
On this one?
Under that. Like, don't click it.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can just deactivate them. Yeah. And pause. Yeah, I was trying not to go too deep on this because this is a lot more advanced past the intro phases. But if you guys have any questions, again, happy to answer anything on these. All right, so next up is a lot of fun with the network panel. So on the network panel, call this at the top the network waterfall. And again, you can clear. And why is it not resetting? Oh, here, let me go to all. And don't preserve. So you can see how long it took everything to load, and then it gives you the breakdown of what's loading when. And you can kind of see here also on the right side, you can see the waterfall of, if you see a really, really long bar, that means there's something large there that took some time to load. And you can kind of fast forward. So like, let's say you can make a little window, kind of like YouTube editing. So if you're like, man, I just want the stuff that's taken a long time in this, and you can see it's these two, right? And you can double click to clear this, and then you can see all the requests that were made. So what's happening here is, like we touched on earlier at a high level of how the web works. You're making a request for some data, some files, images, CSS, HTML, and this is what keeps track of all of that. So you can see there's a request first to labs. Here's some details about that request, the HTTP type, the status code, it was successful, and then you start getting everything else from that page when it loads. So you'll just see, like, here's images that are loaded, they come in, and you can filter at the top here either by name or by type. So all XHR is AJAX calls, so anything scripts are doing in the background to check for things. So you see this first one is called alerts. There is no alert currently that we can see. It usually comes right up on the top here. So this is checking to see if there's an active alert before it shows it to you. This would show you all the JavaScript. So this filters for JavaScript, JS. CSS is any CSS files. Images are any image files, and so on across. So you can see fonts. Fonts are loaded. Manifests, we don't have any, or anything else. And then some of the helpful functions here at the top for tools that you can use. So you have clear, you have preserve log, and disable cache. And both of these are really helpful. So if you are navigating and it's something you're troubleshooting with navigation and you're getting redirected to the wrong place, you can preserve log and you can kind of trace your steps through the requests using the filter and the other types here to see where you're going. So you can kind of see that, like if we go to personal, you'll see the request comes through, you know, at the top for, let's go with get. Ooh, that's GIF. Data URLs. But we can narrow down the window to the first couple things. Are we on the whole? Oh, yep, and we see we are making some requests to Google Analytics and to Facebook. And the reason that we don't see a network request here is because it's already loaded. And that is a Gatsby feature that keeps it really fast. So you can learn a lot more about different apps and different frameworks as well. So the way that Gatsby works is it loads everything up in a Webpack file in the sources. So you'll see, let me get out of content scripts here. Page. So you'll see Webpack in here. And so Webpack basically flattens all the JavaScript that you use in the app. And it'll load everything else you need to keep your app working. So you can see source, your node modules, all that fun front-end framework stuff, which is why we're not seeing any network requests, because it's already loaded. So that's one of the benefits of Gatsby is speed. But let's say like on other sites, if you actually are following like a true anchor tag to another page, you'll see that request here as a get, or if we just type it in. So if we type it in, we'll see labs should show up somewhere in here. A lot of things named labs. So here's the actual request, because we actually use the browser. So when the browser actually makes a network request, it'll show up in here. But if it's preloaded, like a lot of apps are starting to do these days, or front-end frameworks, you won't necessarily see the network request, and you'll kind of have to rely more on the sources tab to kind of follow those click events and see what happens. Another thing by high demand that I had friends and coworkers say they wish they knew is this throttle button. So it just says online, but you can change the throttling, and Chrome will purposefully load it slower to simulate like a connection. And so fast 3G, remember when we thought that was fast? Turns out maybe not as fast as we thought it was. But you can see, like, as the content renders in the paint, like this is the experience that somebody would get on like a really slow like DSL, or maybe even, I don't think dial-up's still around, but like a DSL connection or something might be slower like this, right? So you can see, what their experience is as it's going slow. Probably not so much on desktop, but if you remember the Command-Shift-N, you can jump over to your mobile devices view and see what that first paint of the DOM might look like. So people are experiencing. Yep.
Do
Chris.
CDNs help with that?
CDNs can help, but not really. So CDNs help with latency, but let's say you have a lot of high-res, high-quality images. You're still going to need to download that 2 meg image. It's not gonna matter how close it is to you. It's still got to come through your network. So this is helpful to troubleshoot. And then if you've heard of progressive web apps, this offline mode kind of disables network requests. so you can test how your local storage and your local app is behaving when there is no connectivity, without having to like go up and go to Wi-Fi and do turn off and all that kind of stuff at the OS level. You can do it in the browser and just say, don't make any, you're not allowed to make any outside requests. And then you can test how your app behaves if you want to make a progressive web app and something that's also available offline. Questions?
I didn't know about that.
Let's see. So yep, disable caching, preserve log, filtering, and you can stop recording the network log. Like if I don't really care of what's happening here, it won't show up. So it'll stop populating. So if you had something you're investigating and you wanted to kind of save it or keep track of it a little better, you can do that. Another thing that you can do is, I don't remember where it is. Is it on console? It is confusing me. Oh, that's way tiny. We're gonna have to make that a little smaller. I want to say, so there's another option. I'll have to find it. It's probably hiding in one of the truncated menus. I'm used to seeing it available. It's called a HAR file, and I forget what that stands for, but the acronym is HAR, and it basically kind of records all the events and requests and puts it in a object that can be replayed by the browser. So if you're doing like some customer service stuff, you might be able to walk them through how to save this file and then email it to you. And then you can kind of replay what they experienced to help troubleshoot and diagnose whatever their issue is. It's definitely more advanced to kind of get into those and replaying them and what they do. But I definitely wanted to mention it to you as well, as something that you should look into more if you want to learn more about that one. Let's see, more things about the waterfall. If you're not seeing the waterfall, you can go into settings here and just turn on or off overview. Some people like it, some people don't. I enjoy it, so I usually leave it up there. But if you're just looking for a lot of requests, or if you're looking for, make this bigger again, or filtering, it just kind of gives you a little bit more room. But the visual representation also helps. The longer the line, the longer it took to load. And we can clear that and reload and kind of get everything here. Let's see, any other questions? Oh, here we go. So they now changed to little arrows. There it is, import and export HAR file. It used to be a different icon at some point, I'm pretty sure. So you could export the HAR file and it'll save it. It'll just capture all that DOM state for you, so you can send to somebody to replay it. Let's see, what else do we have here? Images. Filtering, throttling, got that. Any other questions, or do you guys want me to elaborate anything else on here? One of the other notes I had is developers really wished somebody would have told them that they can replay network requests from the network tab. So that is a feature where if you get rid of that, gotta make this bigger. So let's say we want to look for images, or we weren't sure if we were getting an image, or probably not along the lines of images. This is probably usually like an XHR request. I don't think there's too many that are going on here, but you can right click on this and go to replay XHR, and it will just make that request again. So that's helpful if troubleshooting, or like, let's say you get an error back, right, and your status isn't 200, you can go and if you're like troubleshooting an API, you can just keep replaying that to see, check your logs on the back end to see what's happening. So that way you can kind of make that request on demand, rather than trying to filter through all the other requests that are made to the back end at the same time. All right, which brings us to, I'm just going to touch on performance real quick. This is definitely more of an advanced kind of thing. You want to start with recording and then load your page, do like a hard reload. And then after that's done, you can stop it and you can see all kinds of stuff that's happening. So this is everything from network to the specifics of DOM rendering and what's first paint, what's painted in context, what's painted in layout, what threads or what JavaScript is being run on a thread at a time, what's a blocking call that's holding up the rest of everything else that's happening. So this can get really in depth, and you can spend a lot of time here if you really want to get fast and get your page running really zippy. And then the question is always too, like, you know, what's the ROI, right? Like you could spend probably days in here and gain like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of milliseconds, but you know, is it really worth it? So there's like a good trade-off to be made, but there is a lot here when you hit that record button that you can see interactions and network and timings, main thread, animations. If you really enjoy like those nice little touches of animations, you can kind of see what CSS animations and properties are more taxing on performance than others. There's a lot of info out there as well on like what's painting, like if you use like box shadow versus outline or something, right? So one browsers will render faster than the other. So if you really want to get into performance, you can kind of go down that rabbit hole and see which CSS properties are faster at rendering than others. And this, just to be clear, this is specific to Chrome. So if you spend a lot of time optimizing your performance for Chrome, it'll be fast for Chrome, but it's not guaranteed to be faster on another browser. So Safari renders a little bit differently, Firefox renders a little bit differently, but Chromium and Chrome-based browsers would render consistently. So there's some browsers that can render some of the harder CSS, I guess, or I should say more complex CSS a little faster than others. But for the most part, they try to stay pretty consistent in those timings. But it is definitely a rabbit hole you can go down if you really, really want to optimize for animations and page load. We're not going to get into memory. That's a lot more advanced. So another helpful one is application. So the application tab tells you about all the stuff is being stored on your browser and your machine. So if you guys have heard recently, I'm sure about you know, data breaches or how something got hacked or somebody hacked your account, all that kind of stuff is saved in cookies and local and session storage. So if you go to a website and you check that remember me, they are setting something in application storage that saves like a token of your user so they know who you are. And that way when you go back to that page, this is how they know, because you've said, yes, put this on my machine, keep this here because I don't want to log in over and over again. So one of the more helpful things to do is you can actually go and see by, see if I can get some Google ones in here. Oh, I know. Oh wait, I'm going to slash. So here you can see it's asking for location. We'll say okay. But you can see some Google stuff came through, and that's to auto-populate the zip code, right? So we made a request in the background to Google's location services, and we're like, okay, you're in this zip code. This is our best guess. We think you're here, and then we're also saving that in storage. So you can see we have a referral source. Session storage holds a lot of data on your process. So this is like the online sign-up account process, and we try to save stuff for you as you go. So that way, if you stop and come back, it'll still be there, because it'd be really terrible to have to fill out all those forms again. And we really want to make the experience a lot better. So what you can do in here, you can also modify some of these properties. So let's say you're testing something. Let's see, edit value. So you can double click, and so you don't want to call it session and be like my really cool app, right? And so now you've changed that entirely. Probably going to break your site or your app, because now when you go to send that, it'll have a different key. But if you want to change values for testing purposes, debugging, whatever you need to do, you can. Another thing that's really helpful in here is, how many of you guys constantly find yourself like clearing browser cache just to like see something change, right? Because it's like cache, right? So a lot of us. So what you can do, so you don't lose all your other history that you have, like let's say you had a really cool article on Hacker News that you were reading and you didn't want to lose that. You can go into local storage and session storage here, and you can just delete them. So you can just clear all those things that are being set individually. So this is only going to affect this window, this tab that's open, and you can just clear them all out. Cookies, everything, right? And so now, if I refresh, it'll ask me again. See, it starts creating everything because it thinks it's brand new. So this is how you clear site data, and this is a shortcut. You go into clear storage, clear site data, and that will wipe out everything that's been set. So you can see these are empty. Or you can do it manually one at a time. So like let's say you're building an app with some kind of authentication, right? And you want to test your authentication. Well, without having to go back and clear cache every single time, or new private tab or whatever, and doing everything over and over, you can just go here and just delete that session cookie, that token that you saved, right? And then it'll make you, if you want to make sure that you have to log in again, right? Yeah.
In the top, refresh the cleared cache and hard reload.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. Does that have, when it says cache there, is it talking about local storage or session storage, or is it talking more about HTML?
No, it's talking more about HTML network requests. Yeah. Yeah, cookies. So kind of a quick breakdown on cookies versus local storage versus session storage. So cookies are defined by the entity that created them. So they can have an expiration date of whatever you set, or whatever the person set in the browser, right? Because I'm sure you guys have seen those browser settings that are like, don't allow third-party cookies or clear cookies on exit, stuff like that. Session storage is only good for the time that this tab or window is open. So as soon as you close that, all those values are gone. So if you're doing something like populating a form to help people like pick up where they left off, like let's say they're, I don't know, doing it on their commute or on a train or whatever, they close their laptop, they open it up again, it'll still be there. If they close that window, it's gone. Local storage will persist. So local storage, you could set something in local storage and it will be there if you close the browser and open it up again, until you go into clear all history and like check those boxes and wipe it out. So local storage can persist for a while. Any questions or comments? You guys into this still? Learning some stuff? All right, cool. I know it's a lot to take in. I'm trying to go slow, and like I said, I am recording, so we can replay this. I'll post the link, and you guys can look through and kind of pick up on, hey, what was that thing? I'll try to set some bookmarks on like time as far as which tab when. But yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do in here too, and also service workers. So we don't have any service workers here, but a lot of other big sites, big apps will have service workers that will help go and fetch things or bring things or store things as you're progressing. So think of it like a autosave almost. So you would have like a service worker like every 5 minutes, send something off to the database, right? Let's see.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
So there's some settings for the browser, so you can open the browser and restart with the laptop. I think if you have a session cookie, that maybe doesn't. You do remember me doesn't expire. I think it stays.
The remember it really So the question was, what happens if you have browser settings about what stays or what doesn't stay? So it really depends on kind of where you store it too. So if you go and you clear, cookies on exit, but you saved it to local storage, it's not, yeah. So it kind of depends on where you save it to when you do the app. Which is why I just check all those boxes for privacy. I'm like, yes, delete everything. Like, go show it to me again because I'm still developing this. Like, show me everything. So that's also helpful here. So this disable cache and network will always make requests. So if you have this checked, you don't necessarily need to hit the hard refresh shortcut because you're telling it make the request again. Let's see. So security and audits I'm going to skip, as well as layers. I think layers is fairly new. If you see this components and profiler, so I have React and Vue DevTools installed in the browser. So browser extensions can also interact with DevTools. So they can create new tabs, they can create their own tabs, and then there's a whole nother set of like level of DevTools just for that framework. And you can dive into that as well. Audits, I definitely did want to touch on, just real quick. So this is called Lighthouse. It's kind of built in with Chrome. It's to help you diagnose and see how Googlebot and screen readers, your area labeling, your accessibility, and things like that. So you can check some of the different options for performance, if you're using a progressive web app. So like one of the options with progressive web app is it will actually do like an offline kind of check and see how your app behaves as well and give you a report on it. Most of the time the defaults are pretty good. And you definitely want to clear storage most of the time too, if you're looking at performance, because it's not really a good measure if you're loading from cache. And by default it usually measures mobile, because I think it was 2015 officially mobile traffic surpassed desktop traffic, like worldwide. So it's a safe bet that you should probably be starting with mobile performance first. So what you could do here is you could just run the audit, and I could kind of tell you guys what it's doing. This is probably going to be longer because this is the form. Let me just go to the regular site here. And you could see there's different checkboxes too. You can apply different CPU slowdowns to simulate that throttling, simulate a mobile network. And it actually, we have, this is kind of, because this is so zoomed in, there's actually like a process where it shows you the different steps it's doing. So we didn't kind of see that wizard. And there's definitely, there's Chrome extensions affecting it. So performance, it didn't measure because I have extensions that are doing things. But you can click on these and it'll take you to each section. So like accessibility. One of the things I've noticed in using the accessibility from the audits is it gives you a lot of false positives. So it tries to interpret your contrast through the color codes, so like through computed hex colors or whatever you define in your styling. And so if you expand that, you can see, this text is difficult to read, and it tells you it's the failing element is div icon. And so if you click on it, it'll take you there. And then, oh, well, I'm saying area hidden equals true, so screen readers are going to see this, but Lighthouse picked it up and said, hey, contrast isn't good, but you're telling the screen reader to ignore it. So sometimes it'll give you false positives like that, where and you kind of just have to think about what you're looking at in the results, right? Because nothing's 100% perfect. So I have noticed that most of the time, if you have area hidden set to true, the Chrome Lighthouse audit will still look at it and evaluate it and give you feedback. So don't be deterred if you really want that 100%. There's actually a pretty good blog post about how to get a 100% Lighthouse score, making the most inaccessible website ever. And it's pretty hilarious, all the tricks that they do to get the perfect Lighthouse score and then make it just totally unusable at the same time. So like any tool, it can be defeated. So it's good just to kind of keep in mind, be aware of, be conscious of biases in the audit itself. Let's see, some of the other things like best practices is load. And just another thing to keep in mind is that this tool is baked into Chrome. Chrome is maintained by Google. Chromium is maintained by Google. As these audits are updated, Google will use it to push more things Google wants. So there was a recent update that is really trying to push this value for different image types. So I forget what the one came up with. It had like a weird extension that I have not ever seen in the wild yet. And Google is like, 200% gain in performance if you use this file type. I'm like, I don't know anybody that's using this file type. I don't know what that file type is. And then you go look it up and it's like, oh, new image file format from Google. Oh, okay. Well, this makes sense now. So just be conscious of like, this is a tool made by Google. Google is also going to use it to help propagate more Google things. And because they have so much market share, they can do that. They can kind of push us around to use the stuff that they want us to use. And so I think that pretty much takes us to the end of the talk. So what do you guys think? I mean, did you learn a whole bunch, or is this just like way too much at once?
A lot.
A lot.
Tonight.
Yeah.
I knew about this.
Yeah, like a few pieces. and like I said, the goal here is to like just touch on things enough to help you guys learn more. Like learn more about what's going on behind the scenes in the browser. See what apps are doing. If there's like a really cool site you like, now you have like more tools to go check it out and see what they're really doing, right? So yeah, any other questions or comments?
Curious, what are your thoughts on this compared to Firefox developer tools?
So in Steve Jobs kind of way, one more thing in Firefox, and Firefox has been stepping their game up lately. If you go to, let me open, what's that? not getting there yet. So we can go to ozk.com. So one of the fun things that I really enjoy for troubleshooting in Firefox is in their network panel. Let's say there's a post here, right? Well, they have a tab in their, so Chrome had like headers, cookies, params, response, all that same stuff. Firefox added stack trace. So now rather than you having to click on stuff and follow it around, they just tell you. They say, hey, in this file at this line, this is the function that made the request. And you can just click on it and it'll take you right there. So I definitely am enjoying a few of the extra things that Firefox has these days. Safari, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about Safari. As far as battery life on a Mac and you're using Safari, it hands down has the best performance, like battery-wise, because Apple made it. Developer tools leave a lot more to be desired, in my opinion, for Safari. But yeah, Firefox has definitely been stepping their game up lately. So once again, I'm Brian DeVito. I'm a software engineer here at Labs. Thank you.